Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see a lot of people here promptly. We're going to get a few dings as people come into the session, but if someone could just confirm that they can see and hear me, can see my screen in the chat, and that they can access the chat, that would be much appreciated. Julia's waving. Thank you, Julia. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Simon. Awesome. All right, good stuff. So we've got quite a lot of people sign up for this. I'm not sure how many will make it, but we will hopefully get a few people. We've got Joe's here helping me with a bit of admin. The first thing just to say to everybody is if you want to just chat, share stuff, say where you're from, say why you're here, use the chat function in Teams, that would be great. If you want to ask a question that you want me to pick up as we go through today, then please do use the Q&A function. That'll make it a lot easier for us to keep track of everything in there. And with that, I think we'll start to dive in. Probably got a few people coming in over the next minute or two. We're going to be here for an hour or so. My intention is to cover the content that I want to cover in about 50 minutes or so and leave some time for Q&A at the end. There are different speeds that we can go through this, different levels of detail we can go to. This is just a training taster, so we can't, unfortunately, fully replicate our in-person training experiences through these events, and certainly can't cover the full depth and quality of the content and the experiences and the practice that we would go to. But the idea of this is to give you guys a bit of a taste of how we would train this, and really importantly, to give you some practical stuff that you can take away. So I really hope this is a useful, valuable hour of your time where it changes the way that you think about and the way that you approach your sales efforts when it comes to consulting sales. And that's what we're here to talk about. So we've called this Consulting Sales Demystified and Taking the Fear Out of Sales. And we're going to explain the way that I think about the sales process for consulting projects and give you some really practical tools around that. This is stuff that you can write down in the session and you can use and you can apply straight away. There's three things that I'm going to cover as we go through. As I say, this is going to be interactive, so please do use that Q&A function to throw in any questions as we go through. If I can pick them up real time and it's appropriate to do so, I will do. If not, I'm going to save some time at the end to address them. So please do pop your questions in into the Q&A. In the meantime, introduce yourself in chat. It'd be great to know where people have come from. I know some of you have been invited by your team leaders who've been on some of our sales training. Some of you are friends of Honeycomb, and some of you are new to us perhaps. But please do introduce yourself in the chat. And if you want to say a little bit about why you're here, what you're hoping to get from it, then that's always interesting as well. This is not a Honeycomb sales pitch. So this is the one slide we've got on what Honeycomb are. We help the leaders of consulting firms. So we work with the leaders of consulting firms to help them develop exceptional teams. And what you can see here is some of the firms we've worked with over the last couple of years to help develop their teams. And what about me? So my name's Derry. I'm the founder of Honeycomb. Founded the business about 7 years ago. I've been a strategy consultant in my entire career. Essentially, I started at Bain & Company 20 years ago. I worked as an independent. I've worked in boutiques. I was Chief Finance and Operations Officer at Credo Business Consulting, that's now Teneo Consulting. And everything that I do these days is focused around helping think through how to develop exceptional teams. I'm a bit obsessed about it. I'm obsessed with the skills that consultants need, the way that they can put it into practice, and how we can genuinely help people get impact and take action off the back of the training that we do. So that's me. As I say, please do introduce yourselves in the chat if you'd like to, and we're going to dive into the content. So I defined three learning objectives for today. So firstly, I'm going to introduce the three phases of a consultative selling process. And the idea of that is just to take some of the fear out of it. Sales can be quite a scary word for a lot of people, particularly a lot of consultants who are used to delivering fantastic work, see themselves as a deliverer or an analyst or someone that likes to be working closely with clients day to day. And frankly, a lot of us, and I include myself in this, get a bit scared and intimidated by the idea of having to go and sell. Sales itself can be a dirty word. So we're going to take some of the fear out of that and explain that so much of it is just about consulting to your clients or being an advisor. We're gonna do in a minute just a quick self-assessment on your biggest areas of opportunity, and that's why we've got the Slido QR code there. So I'm going to ask you just three simple questions to help you get a sense of where in those phases of a consulting process might be the biggest opportunities, the biggest areas where you can up your game a little bit. And then I'm going to take you through three practical tools. We're going to spin through those fairly quickly, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So get into Slido using the QR code there, and we're going to dive into three questions for you to reflect on for a minute, and we'll just see where everybody's at, what the shape of the group is. So the first of those questions, and again, the QR code's still on here, is I am widely known as an expert in what I do. And that's a pretty high bar, right? To be widely known, particularly on LinkedIn, in the digital world, or amongst your the clients and the people that you care about. If they don't know that you're an expert, then you've got work to do to be somebody who they're going to approach and talk to about sales opportunities. So far, we've got about half of you saying agree, nobody saying strongly agree, and about half of you saying disagree or strongly disagree. And that is pretty common for the type of breakdown we see when we ask the type of question in our training courses. That people feel like they're known broadly as an expert, but there's lots of people who are not there yet, and everybody basically has a bit of work that they can do on that. So that's the first question. All right. Second one is about how well you get to understand your client's needs so that you can write a proposal. And the bar here is to a proposal that hits the mark for your client first time, 80% plus of the time. You know, we never get it perfect every single time, but are you able to have a conversation with clients that gets enough of an understanding that you can write a really solid proposal the majority of the time? So let's see what we've got coming through here. So here we've got a couple of strongly agrees. A bunch of you aren't writing proposals yet, and that's totally fine. I love that you're investing in this at this stage of your career before you're into writing proposals. And we're going to give you the confidence to do that when the time crops up. At about 37, so about 40% of you are hitting the mark first time, 80% of the time. And what I would say to you guys is, if you can up the percentage of times that you're getting your proposals right first time, you're going to save yourself a lot of effort. You're going to build trust with clients more effectively. So the tools, one of the tools we're going to talk about today is going to help you up those numbers a little bit. All right, and then the final question: the projects I sell are well scoped and profitable. So this is about selling stuff that is going to work for your firm. So are you scoping things effectively such that they can be delivered profitably, and they're going to deliver the solutions and the benefits to the client? So again, we've got a bunch of you haven't sold any projects yet. Again, totally cool with that. Most of you saying agree or strongly agree to that. So that's cool. That's good to see. A couple of disagrees. All right. So most of you are pretty confident about the way that you scope and the profitability of your projects. And again, that is quite common when people are coming from a strong delivery background. Interestingly, with the way we often see that flipped on its head is when we have people coming from, say, recruitment firms who are wanting to move more into consulting sales, and they don't know how to scope a consulting project. So these answers get flipped around for those kind of groups. All right, so that's set a bit of context for you, and you can start to think about, like, where are your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to sales. But let me give you a little bit of a framework to think about consulting selling before we do that. And very simply, we see this as three different phases. There's a process here for helping somebody that might be a client of yours one day get to know you, get to trust you, and ultimately buy work from you. And those three phases are what I call them: building authority, consulting, and selling. I'm just going to explain a little bit about what sits under each of those, and also the mindset and the persona that you're trying to get to within each of those. Before I do that, the foundation of all of this is a really strong understanding of your client and the way that they buy the type of stuff that you do. And the biggest theme, if I give one takeaway from all of this, is to always, always, always be putting yourself in the client's shoes, focusing on what do they need, where are they at in their decision process, how ready to buy are they, and meeting them where they're at. There's a bit of a rule of thumb that of your whole target market, there's probably only about 5% of them are in a position where they're ready to buy from you at any one point in time. The other 95% could be super interested in how you can help them, but they're not ready yet. And if you're trying to sell to that 95%, it's really hard. It's really depressing. And getting an understanding of that buying cycle and then where people are at within that buying cycle is super important. So that's the foundation of all of this. We're then going to just build up through the pyramid here, our consulting selling pyramid. So the base of that is a foundation of habits. And we talk about doing things consistently with discipline so that you can start to reap rewards. There is no quick fix here. There's no, oh, run this cold outreach campaign and you'll get some revenue through the door. This stuff takes time to build. So those of you who were answering that you're not writing proposals yet, you haven't sold projects yet, that's fantastic that you're here and starting to think about this. And particularly in that building authority space, that's where habits become super important. You've got to keep doing these things week in, week out to get to a place where you're building authority, you're having conversations, and you're developing and fine-tuning your skills. This is a 10,000 hours thing of putting the practice in to become a master at this stuff. Also within building authority, we have the concept of a personal brand. Like, what are you known for? Who do you help? What do you help them with? And we're going to talk a little bit about that as the first tool that we come into. And another concept called hooks, which we can't go into today, but that is about the set of things that you might do that help somebody step a little bit closer to you, build a bit more trust, build a bit more credibility, get to know you and how you might help them. And your goal in this whole building authority phase is ultimately to build out your network so that you have a bunch of leads, a bunch of people that might be interested, and ultimately you can get them into an intro call, you can get them into a conversation. That flip of a relationship, somebody that you're starting to know, somebody that you're talking about, to flip that into a formal structured sales conversation is where we're going to focus the second tool today, because that's a scary thing for a lot of people. It can feel super awkward. There's a risk that you slip into being too salesy, and it can be really difficult. And we've got a really simple tool to take all of the fear and awkwardness out of that and make it quite simple. So we're going to talk about that as the second tool today. As we move up into consulting, there's a critical point here, which is around the first conversations that you have as you're starting to explore that problem. And that's where we're going to bring the third tool in today, a tool called Stones, which is our consultative selling methodology that is proven time and again to be super valuable in having those first conversations in a really powerful way. Once you've got those first conversations, the goal is then to co-create a solution to the problem with your client so that they're bought into the approach that you're suggesting. And ultimately, if you can align on that co-created solution, this is when you can document that in a proposal. So the proposal isn't about pitching all of the stuff that you can do and all the wonderful things about your firm. The proposal is about documenting the solution that you've agreed with your client is the right way to solve the problems that you've uncovered. And then you put in a bit about why you're going to be great and proving it and giving them that confidence. But the proposal isn't about like all the great stuff that we can do. It's about the solution to the problem. And then finally, the selling bit at the end, the bit that kind of scares a lot of people, We just call that closing. And there's objection handling in there. There's understanding the problems that they might have. There's addressing pricing structures and contracts and stuff. It's not an easy thing at all. But if you've gone through these steps and you've got that proposal watertight 95% plus of the time, the close generally is pretty straightforward. And so we're going to focus today on the bottom half of this pyramid that sets the foundation. Because if you don't get that stuff right, you can throw in every sales trick in the book and you're not going to win as much work as you might do. The mindset that each of these stages takes you through is going from a wanting to be known as a visible authority out there in the market, known for your expertise, known as the person that helps a certain type of person with a certain type of problem. That visible authority gets you into conversations where you can be a trusted advisor, which is often the comfort zone for a lot of consultants. You're building relationships with people, you're talking to them, you're helping to understand and solve their problems, and ultimately become a revenue generator. And that's what I want for all of you working in consulting firms. Life gets a hell of a lot easier if you know how to consistently and predictably bring revenue in through the door. So that's our sales pyramid. We're going to dive into a couple of specific tools within that over the next 40 minutes or so. Those 3 tools, and try to give them real simple names: fishing line, the turn, and stones. The first 2 of these, by the way, come from this book, The Irresistible Consultant's Guide to Winning Clients, by a guy called David Fields. You can see this is a well-thumbed copy. It's a simple little read. It's a little bit focused on independent consultants. So if that's you, great. If you're in a firm, it's still got really good content in there. It's a little bit American, but translates well enough to the UK market. Would definitely recommend you pick that up. And the third one we're going to talk about is Stones, which is our consultative selling methodology. So just to explain what these things are, the fishing line is a very simple statement that gets clear on who you help and the problems you solve. It's not about your solutions. The idea of this is to help your future clients identify you, see you as a helpful person for them. We're going to dive into that one first. The turn is the trick for moving from a personal relationship and interesting conversation into something that is more of a structured conversation about a potential project, and doing that without the awkwardness that whole thing can create. And then finally, Stones is the go-to consultative selling meeting structure that we recommend. And the idea here is it's a tool you can align your team around that you can all use to get your prospects talking, get to new levels of understanding, and ultimately uncover all of that information that you need to write that proposal and get it right first time. So let's dive in. Just a quick reminder for those new joining recently, if you have questions that come up as I'm going through this, you're trying to think, how do I apply this to my situation? How do I really understand this and make it practical? Throw your questions into the Q&A at the top, and Joe or I will pick those up and I'll make sure that I address them. Thank you for all of those that are introducing yourselves in the chat. It's great to see, particularly great to see some of very familiar names in there. Please do introduce yourself in chat if you've just joined. It'd be great to hear more from you. Right, let's dive into some of this practical stuff. So firstly, fishing line. So we're down at the bottom of the pyramid at the moment. We're thinking about building authority. We're thinking about becoming known as a visible expert out there where you're known for something. And the key question that then brings up is, if I'm going to be visible, who do I need to be visible to? And when we think about building that network of people who know who you are, the very first question you have to ask yourself is, who do you want to help? Who is your client? And if you can't articulate that clearly enough that they can recognize themselves, then you've got work to do on how you're articulating that. So the questions we think about when building a network are, who do you want to help? How many of those people actually know that you exist? How many of them know that you could be someone who could help them? And then finally, do they actually trust you to help them? Do they know you well enough, know what you can do well enough, trust you enough that when they've got the problem that you solve, they're going to pick up the phone? They're going to invite you in to talk to them about that problem. That's the acid test of all of this. And reality, ultimately, you need maybe 150 people that fall into that bucket, and you will have an absolutely thriving consulting practice. This isn't about having thousands of people. This is about having a relatively small number of the right people. And now many of you will be sitting there right now saying, well, maybe I've got 5. And again, that's totally fine. This stuff takes time to build up, but at least if you know what you're trying to do, you can start to build that up. So the fishing line tool is the best way that I've seen to clearly articulate that piece around who do you help and what's the problem that you solve. And very simply, it's a short phrase, less than 15 words, less than 10 if you can get it down to less than 10, that clarifies who you help and the problem you solve. It needs to be really easy to remember, needs to allow prospects to self-select. So if somebody sees it, they need to be able to say, hey, that's me and that's my problem. These people might be useful to me. This person might be someone who could help me. It's not about your solution. This isn't your marketing tagline. This isn't saying what you do. Your clients don't really care. They care about whether or not you know them and you can help solve their problem. And my advice to all of you when you're writing these down, because I'm going to invite you to write some down in a minute, get it as focused and niche and targeted as you dare. Feel a bit uncomfortable about how focused you've gone with it, because you want that particular individual to recognize you. So I'm going to give you some examples. Firstly, here's ours. I had this up at the start of the session. You may have seen it on our website, on some of our social media, etc. We help consulting team leaders develop exceptional teams. And the whole idea of that is that when people come across Honeycomb, if they're a consulting team leader and they care about the capabilities of their team, they will recognize that we are people that can help them, that I am someone that can help them. So for my personal brand, it's really important that we have this out there consistent everywhere. And hopefully it's recognizable and memorable enough that, when you come off this webinar and you go onto your next calls and you say, oh, I've just been on this fantastic webinar with Honeycomb, and someone says, who are Honeycomb? What do they do? You'll be able to say, they help consulting team leaders develop exceptional teams. It needs to be that memorable and that punchy. Here's some other examples these are real examples from other consulting firms. So we help European IT companies that are bogged down with process. Bogged down is a nice emotional word that can really resonate with people. And if you work in a European IT company and you're feeling overwhelmed by process, you're going to say, these are people that can help us. I work with B2B manufacturers tired of slugging it out for market share. That's actually David Fields, who wrote the Irresistible Consultant's Guide to Winning Clients. That's his own fishing line. I help leadership teams achieve clarity. We help the global insurance industry innovate. So my invitation to all of you now, as you kind of think about the fishing line concept, is just grab a bit of paper or open up an email or your note program, whatever you use, and try and write yours down. So remember the rules here. Maximum 15 words. If you can get it shorter, better. It's about them, not you. Resist the temptation to talk about how you solve the problem. Resist the temptation to talk about your solution to that problem. That's the hardest bit of this. That's the bit that we consistently find when we run this in live training and we have people read out their fishing lines and share them with each other. It's really hard for a lot of consultants to get their heads out of what I do and into the problem that my client has. My invitation to you is write some of this down. It won't be perfect first time, but get off the blank page onto something. Share it in the chat. Give each other feedback. I'll have a look at some when I can towards the end. That's
Sorry, quick question at the moment. What happens when the them is 2 or 3 distinct groups of people?
2 or 3 distinct groups of people. Pick one. Who's the most important? And then ask yourself, why am I trying to sell to 2 or 3 distinct groups of people? Why am I spreading myself that thin as an individual? So that might be the case at an overall firm level, that you have different types of buyers. But if you as an individual are trying to sell to 2 or 3 groups of people, you're diluting the understanding of what you do. If those 2 or 3 groups of people are closely related, then try and find some language that allows them all to self-select. But my recommendation would be make your fishing line about the one that's the most important, that's you're doing 60-70% of your work with, or the one that you want to work with, and get uncomfortable about how focused that is. What you'll find is if the others are close enough to that person and have similar types of problems, then they will still self-select in. But the broader you spread yourself on this stuff, the harder it is to talk consistently to that individual, to consistently share content that helps them, to position yourself, to design your solutions in ways that help them. So I really do encourage you to resist the temptation to spread yourselves too thin on these things. All right, we've got a few coming into the chat. I help organizations prepare for the EU Pay Transparency Directive. Rachel, that's super focused. As Joe said, any specific types of organizations. I'd even say any specific people. So remember, what you're trying to help is a person, not a company. And I know some of these examples are talking about people, are talking about organizations. My preference is to try and talk about the person, if you can. I help CTOs get complex technology programs straightened out. That's great. Simon, hi. Good to see you. See you next week. I help private equity funds make successful investments and create value in financial services companies. Awesome. Nice. I help organizations in the life sciences sector. Yeah, Rachel, that's better. That's already more specific, right? Good stuff. I help FS firms navigate the opportunities and pitfalls of Gen AI. Love it. I help the NHS to de-risk buying processes and achieve high quality value for money services for their patients. We help financial services firms optimize. I help FS. There's a lot of FS people in here. Maybe you guys should all get together and see if you can help each other. Awesome, great stuff, guys. Thank you. So keep going with those. I'm going to move on and talk about the turn. So imagine the scenario. So the turn here is about seamlessly moving from a relationship into a proper sales conversation, which a lot of people find to be quite an awkward thing. And I want you to put yourself in the position here where you're at a conference and you've been chatting to somebody who and they've asked you what do you do, and you've said, I help asset owners escape the gravity of outdated workflows, and they've gone, oh, that's me, interesting. They've indicated that they have the problem that you can help with, and you hit that awkward moment where you're like, oh, this is a potential lead. Oh, I might be able to sell myself to this person. And you want to kind of flip the conversation and get into it, but it's not appropriate right there. And it feels really awkward anyway. And you're in real risk of becoming too salesy. So this is a very simple concept called the turn, which takes away all of that awkwardness and shifts the nature of that conversation really nicely and cleanly. And I've found it like a really powerful thing for me personally, and I'm glad to be sharing it with you guys. So here, very simply, this is what it is. When that opportunity comes up and you're talking about some challenges, the problems, the things that you know how to solve for them, and you can help this person, if you just say, are you open to setting up a separate conversation to explore ways you could address those challenges? I'll explain in a minute like why this works, but write that down. And if it doesn't quite work for you, if it doesn't sound like natural language for you, then adjust it. But I'm going to tell you the three most important parts of it that you don't want to lose. But it's important that you make it your own, that it resonates for you. So the first part is the word open. If you ask someone, are you open to something? It's quite hard for them to say no. And if they do say no, it'll be a real no. Like, they're not saying no because they think you're just trying to sell to them. They're not saying no because they think you're being pushy. It'll be no because genuinely what they say is, I'd love that, but I don't want to waste your time because we really don't have any budget. I can't get this through, etc., etc. So you get some really good data when you ask that question. More often than not, you get a yes. So the word open is really important. The separate conversation piece is really important, because what this does is it automatically creates an agenda for that conversation. You've got the right now to put that in the diary. You've got the right to invite a colleague who's an expert in that space to come along. You can prepare for it properly, and they're going to go into that meeting knowing that you're going to talk about that stuff. This isn't just we've bumped into each other at a conference and suddenly I'm being kind of bombarded into a conversation from this person trying to sell to me. This is, we're going to have a conversation deliberately on this topic to explore some stuff. And then finally, that word explore is the third piece that's really, really important. This is not a separate conversation to talk about how we might help you. It's not a conversation to talk about scoping a project that we could do for you. This is a conversation about exploring ways that they could address those challenges. You're staying centered in what they need. You're very much in the low self-orientation part of the trust equation, if you know what that is. This is about sitting in their shoes and being there as a willing person, happy to help them, with no explicit broader agenda. So, as I say, write that down, make it your own, and make a little commitment. Try and memorize it. Say it to yourself in the mirror a few times so that it is there ready when you need it. What you don't want to be doing is looking it up on your phone and saying, oh, what was that turn thing that Derry said? I need to say those words. You've got to get it in your mind when you're in these environments. Are you open to setting up a separate conversation to explore ways you could address those challenges? So that's the turn. Super simple, but takes a lot of the fear out of these kinds of conversations. And when you do that, you're then into that first conversation with somebody where you're properly going to explore the problems that they've got and the opportunities and start to think about ways that they might solve them. And this is where Stones comes in. So Stones is, as I say, the go-to consultative selling meeting structure that we use. This is how we approach every conversation with our own prospects, how we train clients to have conversations with their prospects. And it is super powerful in getting people talking, uncovering new levels of understanding, getting information out on the page. Before we go into this, I want you all just to have a little think about a typical first conversation meeting. So whether this is a brand new prospect, cold inbound that you've had that you're talking to for the first time, whether it's a client that you've worked alongside for a year and you're moving into a conversation to talk about another phase of work, etc. Like whatever that scenario is, just hold that meeting in your head and have a think about how you'd typically do it, particularly if it's somebody new to you and your firm. How would you typically structure that meeting? And be honest about what you normally do. Like, at what point do you start to introduce your firm, what you can do, your credibility, your testimonials, your methodology? Like, at what point do you bring all of that in? At what point do you start talking to the client about their problem? How much are you wanting to get them talking versus your pitching and showing your expertise and building credibility? And just think about all of that. And then you can compare what I'm going to suggest as a model, and maybe you're doing it already, maybe it's a bit different. Let's see what you take from it. So simply put, this is Stones. So Stones stands for Situation Tomorrow Obstacles, the STO part of the conversation. Now us, explore solutions and solidify. And I talk specifically about the STO side and the NES side of the conversation because there's a purpose to having those different sides to the conversation. So what I'm going to do is just spin through what each of these mean and particularly the mindset that you need to bring into each of these moments. And now I've only got about 15 minutes to cover this off. Normally we'd spend 2 or 3 hours at least in the training room going through this in detail, explaining it all, practicing it, running role plays, etc. So this is very much going to be a bit of a sheep dip into it. We do actually have a Stones e-learning course, which can give you a bit of a deeper sheep dip if you're not in one of our training sessions in the near future, but let us know if that's of interest. I'm going to spin through it quickly now, and when we can take some questions. The critical thing here is the mindset that you bring in at the start of the conversation. The mindset is, I'm going to ask questions, I'm going to listen, and all I really want to do is get to a level of understanding, get to a really clear picture of what's going on for this person and their organization in the context of the problem that we're there to talk about. If you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to constantly be sitting there thinking about how I'm going to reply, how I'm going to share my expertise, how I'm going to share stories, etc., then you're going to miss the trick on this. So that mindset is critically important, listening with the intent to understand. So let's start it off. So, situation, this is really about getting the relevant background information from the client, helping them articulate the current situation that they find themselves in so that you get to that common understanding. I'm going to give you at the end a little intro script to get them talking about this stuff quite quickly. This is about asking questions like, I'd love to hear more about the challenges you're seeing in your market. So that's the situation part of the conversation. And once you've got to that baseline understanding of the problems that they've got, why they're even having this conversation with you in the first place, you can then flip into tomorrow, the next phase, which is to get to an understanding of the value that they see from solving the issue that they've raised or grasping the opportunity that they've raised. This is about being able to describe the future, the benefits that they're going to get from solving that problem. It flips them from the situation where they're often talking about things that are difficult and broken and not working and causing them some pain into a world that where it would be different if they were able to fully address all of those things. They might not know how to get to it. In fact, they probably don't know how to get to it. That's why they're having a conversation with you. But this is going to shift them into a much more positive frame of mind. And again, you're asking questions, you're coaching them, you're using methods to help them get to these light bulb moments, to help them understand things that they haven't quite thought about before. And in doing that, you're demonstrating your own expertise and credibility by the questions that you ask. You're turning it into a thought-provoking conversation for them. Now, you've got the situation where they currently are. You've got this future promised land, the tomorrow. There's a reason why they're not there. There's probably more than one reason. And the obstacles part of this is to try and understand what all of those things are. Like, what is the reason that you're not there now? Like, uniquely true to your team that's stopping you getting to there. And the reason that you're asking this question and uncovering all of this is that if the solution that you end up proposing, that you end up designing with them, doesn't address all of those obstacles, it is not going to work. It's going to fall flat. So you've got to get all of those obstacles out on the table, get really clear on them so that you can knock them off one by one in your solution. This could be things to do with capacity, capability, the resources, the budget that they've got. It could be political stuff. It could be about the lack of commitment and the will to change and whether people are really bought into trying to get there. Whatever those things are, your solution is going to have to address them. And if you don't know what they are, you might end up selling a piece of consulting work that then goes nowhere. And I've done that. I've been there, and it's painful. And it doesn't lead you to great client testimonials and case studies and all that good stuff. It leads you to just a bunch of pain and awkward conversations. So get this stuff out on the table as early as you possibly can. So this STO part of the conversation is fundamentally about trying to get to 4 different types of understanding, 4 different levels of understanding. Have a little think about what those types of understanding might be. These are things that you might understand after it. They're things that they might understand after it. What we're trying to do is get to these levels of understanding. And I'm going to just build them up. I don't have time to kind of run the whole exercise with you on it, but do try and have a little think about what they might be and see if it matches what comes up on the list here. So the first one is fairly obviously that you have a good understanding of their situation. Like, a lot of people go into these sales conversations and they don't even try and get to that because they're straight into pitching. They're straight into our solution. This is how we can help. This is what we do. And they haven't really taken the time to understand their situation. So I say it's obvious, but also a lot of people are not doing it. But it's also the entry stakes in doing this really well. Now, we've worked through situation tomorrow obstacles. At this point in the conversation, we haven't really said anything about who we are and what we do. So the next level of understanding is based on your knowledge of their situation, you can understand what you're going to share with them that's aligned to that. So when you do introduce your firm and some case studies and the examples of what you do, it's laser focused on the stuff that is relevant to them. And if you share a bunch of stuff that's not relevant to them, that is negative marks in their mind. They're going to trust you less. They're going to find you less relevant. So this is your opportunity to share stuff that is super, super focused on what they need. The third piece is that they understand their situation better. You've asked a bunch of thought-provoking questions. You've painted a picture of tomorrow. You've systematically identified all of the obstacles that they've got, and they've got massively more clarity now about where they are, where they want to go, and what it's going to take to get there. So just by having this conversation with them, you have dramatically shifted their understanding of their situation. Happens an awful lot. Very often, clients might end up describing this as a bit like a therapy session. It's a bit like talking to a psychologist or a counselor. And then the final level of understanding is that they understand that you understand their situation. And this is really critical to the trust and credibility. So by playing back everything that you've talked about in a nicely structured way, in the way that consultants generally are pretty good at structuring stuff, you play that back to them, you check that you've got it all right, that you're on the same page, that they're understanding what you've said. They get this sense that this person gets me. They know me, they know the type of problems I'm facing, and I've got confidence that they're going to be the people to solve it, to help me. Once you get to that, you can then flip into the now us part of this conversation. And this is a focused thing just to help them understand how you might be able to help. This isn't wheeling out your 25 slide pitch deck where you talk through endless examples of what you've done. This is just a focused piece just to get them into the place where they go, right, I get that this person has things that they can help me with, that they can talk about a solution. You want to get pretty quickly through that now us into exploring solutions with them. And this is about addressing all of those obstacles so you can get to the tomorrow, the future land, and co-creating that along with them. Now, this is a big topic area, like how you identify the right solutions, how you think about scoping those out, all of the benefits that might be delivered along the way, how you get to proof of value early in your project, etc. Very simply, my rule of thumb on this is to start by bookending the options that they have with a very simple, like one step forward solution that just gets them moving, that's low cost, easy, and delivers a little bit of value, but not very much. And the full bells and whistles version of like everything it would take to knock off all of those obstacles and convincingly and definitely get you to that tomorrow. Chances are what they want is going to sit somewhere in the middle. But if you provide those bookends, you're already creating some structure around it. And you can describe them in ways that you know you can deliver on. And then you can start to shape the bit that's in the middle. So that's all I'm going to say about explore solutions for now. The final piece here is around solidify. And this is a really, really critical step that often gets missed. You've got to maintain momentum out of these meetings. You've got to make sure that they agree that where you've got to is fits for them and that you're on the same page with them. Get them to agree to that. Don't just assert that you're on the same page. And you've got to create some momentum. And one of the critical ways of doing that, well, two critical ways of doing that. One is always get the next date in the diary, the next conversation, ideally, or at least a date where you're going to send them a proposal. You've got something that's happening in the future. And the second piece is to give them a small task to do, something that is going to make sure that you stay in their minds a little bit because they've added something onto their to-do list. It might be sending an NDA. It might be sharing a document that they've screen shared with you in the meeting and sending it over by email. It might be introducing you to a colleague that you need to speak to. Whatever it is, it needs to be a little action, something not too onerous, but something that makes them demonstrate that they're committed to continuing this process with you. And it also has the advantage of giving you something that you can follow up with if it doesn't happen. And often it won't happen because they're going to leave this meeting and they're going to bounce straight into the next meeting and they're going to stop thinking about you until you send that proposal through. So giving them that action just keeps you front of mind. So that solidify step is super, super important. That also has to include tracking the meeting, the outcomes in your CRM, your pipeline process, whatever it is. Getting the notes down there and making sure you're clear on what was agreed and sending those notes over to them afterwards as well. So that is Stones. I've flown through that extremely quickly, but hopefully there's enough in there that you can think, you know what, there's a different way of approaching these conversations. So that's situation, tomorrow, obstacles, now us, explore solutions, and solidify. Now, there's a lot there that you might try and start implementing. What I'm going to do is give you a script that gets this conversation going off to the right start. So this is the final bit of content I'm going to cover today. As I say, I'm going to save 10 minutes or so at the end for questions that you've got. So please do start popping questions into that Q&A. I haven't had a look at it yet, but if there's anything in there, and we'll pick those off as we go. So think about how this might apply to your personal situation, any questions you've got about how to actually make this real, and we'll pick those off in the last 10 minutes. So with your stones conversation, like partly what you're trying to do is you're trying to take them backwards into their situation, into all of the detail of that and the obstacles to help them towards a better future. You're trying to get to build trust with them, that you're trying to demonstrate your expertise, and you're trying to do all of that really efficiently, because very often you've only got an hour in a meeting like this. Ideally, you try and get that to more like 90 minutes, but it's pretty hard these days to get someone to commit to 90 minutes for a first up conversation. Maybe if you've used the turn effectively, you can get the time in the diary because you know that they're going to get a load of value out of it. But you'd need to move pretty quickly through these stages if you want to get all of the information that you need to write that proposal and get that right 80, 90, 95% of the time, first time. So when you think about opening that meeting, you come in the room, you've made a bit of small talk, and you're like, right, I've got to get the meeting going. You want to set the scene, clearly state the objective, make sure everybody's on the same page as to why you're there. You need to demonstrate that you've prepared a bit, that you've put some time and effort into helping them, because remember, you're there to explore the way, the solutions they've got, the options they've got to address their challenges. You need to get them into an open-minded frame so that they're able to speak freely. You need to get them speaking. All of that. Think about it in your normal meetings, like how long does it really take to do that, to like make all of those introductions, to get the meeting going, etc. Normally when we ask this in live training, people say 10, 15, even 20 minutes. That's a huge chunk of your meeting that you're not using to understand their problems, that you're not using to start to get under the skin of what's really going on in this particular situation. So this script I'm going to give you, feel free to screenshot this slide, or we'll share the materials after anyway, but this is our go-to method for getting that meeting open. This is one way of saying it. I'm going to explain the important bits of this again. Is make it real for you, make it comfortable. It might feel a bit clunky to start with, but whenever we give a script like this, the idea is that it gives you a starting point. It's something to riff off, to tailor, to make personal to you, but it's got some really important bits in it. So you imagine you're in the meeting room. Ideally, you're doing this face-to-face. So many consultants are reluctant to go and meet clients face-to-face these days, and they are massively missing a trick. If it's at all possible, I would definitely recommend having these conversations face-to-face. Sometimes you'll be doing it on Teams. That is just a feature of the way that we work these days. But you're in there, you're making a bit of small talk, etc. And then there's a point where you need to take control of the meeting. So you say, anyway, thanks for taking the time to meet with me today. I know things are pretty busy around here, especially at this time of year. Obviously, we're here to talk about, the example here is AI enablement and how we're helping our clients create and test new customer propositions faster than ever before. We've had a chance to look at your website. We've brought along a few ideas that may or may not help, depending on your situation. But before we do that, John, what would be really helpful, just so I can understand your situation, if you could tell me a little bit about some of the programs you're running at the moment, some of the things that are working well, or maybe not so well, and anything else that you think would help me understand your situation better. Break eye contact, start making notes. 90% of the time, they will just start talking. They'll just start talking about their situation. Now, let me just break down the important parts of this so that when you change it and tailor it and make it your own, you don't lose the critical stuff. So the word anyway, it's like a clapperboard coming down. Like, right, we're shifting out of the small talk into the business of why we're here. We're taking control of the meeting and we're cracking on. Nobody minds that. Nobody finds it rude. You're just going to crack on. You say a few things that are building empathy, and then you state the objective in a single sentence. We're here to talk about the problem that you said was a problem for you and how we're helping clients with it. You're bringing that to the fore. You're in a single sentence. They know that you know why you're there. You're demonstrating that you're prepared because you've had a chance to review the information or look at their website. You've brought along a few things that may or may not help. And the may or may not is really important because that helps them understand that you're not just going to share a bunch of stuff with them. You need to understand a bit more before you can really share that with them. And then we ask this cluster question. We say their name because it primes them, it grabs their attention, it lets them know they're going to have to speak in a minute, and they start listening a little bit more. The cluster question enables them to pick which bit of that they start talking about. So we ask about the programs they're running at the moment, things that are working well. Nobody ever asks what's working well, by the way, in these meetings, or the things that are working not so well. And then the whole thing is set up for this final question. Anything else you think would help me understand your situation better? And when they do that, they'll start to pour out all of the situational stuff that we've been talking about. So take that script, make it your own, make it relevant to you, make it your language, get comfortable with it. And my invitation to all of you is the next time you're in an exploratory conversation with a potential new client, try opening it like this and see what happens. And the feedback we consistently get from all of the people that we've trained on this is like, wow, I had a completely different, much deeper, much richer conversation, and we got to a much better place. And very often it quickly leads to sales. So I do strongly recommend that you guys give this a go. So we've got 8 minutes left on the time. Very happy to answer questions that we've got. Just to summarize, we talked about the consultative selling pyramid. This is the honeycomb model that we train on, that we structure a lot of our training about. There is a huge amount of depth under each of these different pieces. We've only scratched the surface of it today, as you can imagine. But if you can think about those 3 phases of building authority, consulting, selling, and figure out where is the biggest bang for the buck for you personally in trying something new, experimenting with something, starting to do it differently, then you'll start to up your sales game pretty quickly. We typically cover this in 2 or 3 days of live training in groups of 10 to 12 people. If that's of interest, obviously we'd love to chat more about it. Please do get in touch. We do have e-learning courses on Stones and on developing your network as a consultant. So again, if that's of interest, let us know. And I think Joe put in the chat that we have a series of articles on our on the Skill Consultant blog, free newsletter you can sign up for. I'll give you a link to that in a second. Today we've covered these 3 tools: fishing line, the turn, and Stones. Write down your fishing line, 15 words or fewer, who you help, the problem you solve. Write down your version of the turn, remembering you're asking if they're open, you're asking for a separate conversation to explore how they might address their challenges. And think about Stones, and particularly that Stones opening script and whether you can use that. And I'm just going to pull up this final slide. A couple of things you can do here. So I really want you to take an action off the back of this training today. So if you scan the left-hand QR code, you can pop a smart action, something that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, into our smart action system. We'll email it to you. You'll get some guidance on how to complete it, and you'll get some nudges as you head towards the deadline that you've selected. So if there's something you want to do, pop it into that smart action system there. And then the final piece
sorry to interrupt you. It just might be worth saying that even if people are watching this on catch up or on demand, that system would still work. It's not necessarily just good for today.
Yeah, please do that. I'm also going to pop a link in the chat, which is a feedback form, which I'd really appreciate if you've got something valuable out of today, or there's something that you felt could have been better, or other future webinar topics that you'd like to talk about. Please do fill in that feedback form. And then finally, subscribe to the Skill Consultant. It's free. It comes out every week. There's a ton of value on there. There's a couple of thousand people receiving that every week. Be one of them if you are not yet. And we run webinars, workshops like this every month or so. So if you go to honeycombps.co.uk resources, you can see the stuff that's coming up in the future. All right. I'm going to dive into Q&A because I can see there's
You've got 2 questions in there. The first one's relating to the Stones conversation. Any tips for asking their budget for the work? which I'm sure you will have.
Yes. So Rachel, great question. So, and I didn't cover this because of time, but when you get to the end of the STO piece, there are a number of questions that it can be really valuable to ask at that point, because they're feeling quite positive at that point. Like you've just got to those 4 levels of understanding, and you're going to start moving forward to solutions. So we ask questions around timing, we ask questions around authority, and we ask questions around budget. And at that point in time, the question is really like, do you have any budget allocated for this? Do we need to go and kind of steal some, help you get some, help you make a case for it? And do you have a number in mind? Now, sometimes they will say, yeah, we've allocated X for this project. Very often they'll say that they don't. It's really important to start to test that out. So if you can, as you get towards the explore solutions piece and you're laying out 2 or 3 different options, if you can put ballpark numbers around those options, it'll really help you get your proposal down tight, because you can just monitor their reaction. If they genuinely don't know, then I would put all 3 options in a proposal with pricing, and you'll pretty quickly get to what they think is affordable. So asking that question at the end of the 4 types of understanding, at the end of the STO section, like, do you have any budget allocated for this, etc., can really help. Simon, I can see we're a firm of 100 with quite different service lines. Do you recommend several different fishing lines for different parts of the firm? Yes, broadly. So the optimal here is that there's a nested structure of fishing lines, effectively. So you have your overall fishing line for the firm that is probably a little bit broader. Once you're in a firm of 100 people, it might be a bit broader. Each of those service lines will have their own version of that. And then each person within that service line will have their own version of that. And as you move down that pyramid, the fishing lines get more and more specific and more focused, so that each individual is articulating their own particular area of expertise within there, if that makes sense. And that exercise can be really nice. It can be nice to do it bottom up, actually. So you get as many people as are relevant within your firm to write down their fishing line, and you look at them all side by side, and you'll realize actually many of us think that we're working with different people solving different problems than with each other, because we've never quite articulated all of that cleanly. But if you can get to that kind of rolled up pyramid version of it, then it all starts to fit together really nicely. So that's how we tend to think about that for different firms. And yes, we will circulate a link to the recording afterwards. All right. Any other questions that anybody's sitting on? We have 2 minutes left. Very happy to take questions. The final thing on that slide there is, if you want to have a chat about any of this stuff, then always happy to chat. No obligation. I'm not going to hard sell you. I might ask you about your situation and your tomorrow and your obstacles, but I'm not going to hard sell you. I'm very happy to chat with anybody that wants to, and feel free to grab some time in my diary through the QR code and the link at the bottom there. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon. If you want to share your fishing lines as well, then feel free to drop me an email, and I'll give you a little bit of feedback on them too. But thank you very much for spending an hour or so with me today. I hope you got a lot from it. Please let us know what can be helpful in the future. And have a great day.